So today, as I was driving in, there is here in Dalton these little raised up median looking things. They're not very tall,
All right.
but they're designed to keep you from, going over. And I was coming back from getting the donuts for this morning for the people that are here, and I saw this car literally hop that little median and start heading toward my lane, and then they veered back and hopped back over, but it was a very small car, so it just kind of looked like it was bouncing. And as I drove by, I saw this poor guy's face. I think he didn't know that was there, and I wasn't able to tell if he had a license plate from Georgia or not. But I started to think about how I almost did that yesterday, because I was going to stop and get food for the group yesterday, but I was running out of time. But as the last minute happened, I was like, I could just whip in here, but it had one of those little medians.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't do that, thankfully. But I know what you and I have done at the hotel we stayed at. So would you describe what the hotel we stayed at has and what we both ended up doing this week?
It has when you drive off of turn into the parking lot, and you're kind of coming into the back side of the hotel.
Yeah.
And so it's got a driveway that goes around, but the problem is that when you drive in, it has a drop of probably 20 feet. And so you can't hardly see the right side as you're turning. You're kind of coming down, for maybe about 30 feet or whatever. And it's a nice little curb there. So I got some curb rash yesterday coming in there. Thankfully the Jeep's got big enough tires. It didn't bother me, but but they're there. And so I drove all up on the side of it. And the more that obviously that you're turning, it does curve around, but you cannot see it at all. And so I know that thing has been eat up with everybody driving over it. But it's funny because as we turn back in, Michael said, well, I ran over that yesterday. I said, well, I did too, actually. So I'm sure everybody who has pulled in here has, especially if they got a trailer or anything else on there. But you just can't see it because you just drop way down, so that happens.
Well, and you had at least the benefit too of it was daylight, but it's still hard to see it. I'm coming in at 1:30 in the morning, driving in from where I was preaching. I'm exhausted. I'm ready to get into bed. And I didn't know that it was even there. I hadn't even seen anything, just like you. And it's also dark, so it's not like I was really paying as much attention. I was like, I'll just turn in here and it'll be fine. And you know how if you've ever driven where you're exhausted, you get to the last 20 minutes or so and you start kind of like, okay, I gotta focus. I got to lean in. I got to do whatever. That was me toward the last end of that trip. And I thought, I do not want to wreck 10 minutes from the hotel. I need to be able to stay focused. And then I pull into the hotel and I thought I wrecked because I was all of a sudden like this, and I'm not supposed to be like this. And I drove like full over it for a while until it naturally lipped and turned around. And that's when I kind of slammed back down. And I thought, well, it'll be just my luck if tomorrow I've got a flat tire, because that did happen to me once where I was going somewhere and I punctured my tire, didn't know it. Got in the next day and it said, your PSI is at 7. Like, that can't be right. So I had to get my tire changed. So I was kind of worried that would happen. But the Tahoe, I guess, is also a benefit because it handled that well.
Right.
So we're glad to have you back with us, David, for this.
It's good to be back.
More laid back, time. What we kind of base the premise of this show on is there's a time for everything, time to laugh, time to have fun.
That's right.
And we love stories, and the preacher stories are almost always the best. And even if it's not something that people at home relate to as much, I just remember growing up and going to the lectureship at Power and all the other things and hearing, as we would take some of these preachers out to dinner, hearing some of these stories. I say this on almost every episode, but it bears repeating, I believe. And I thought y'all were lying growing up. I was like, there's no way this is true. They've got to be putting it on because it's, more fantastical if you add a little, spice to it, so to speak, and be like, yeah, and then this happened. And it's like, there's no way that happened. Then I got to preaching school. Same thing. They keep saying, here's what happened to me. And they said, there's no way that's what happened to you. Then I became a preacher and I took back everything I ever thought because I thought, yeah, okay, maybe this stuff does happen on a regular basis. So David, with any type of things that have happened to you in your time as a minister or just in life in general, do you have anything you'd like to share with us today?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm full of them just like you guys are. I'm convinced. I heard you speaking. I was thinking, we are preachers. we need illustrations, God makes sure that we have plenty of illustrations.
Yeah,
for sure.
He provides those illustrations sometimes in funny ways. We have them. When you were talking a moment ago about you driving, I had been to Memphis. I can't remember the year, but I was coming back late, and I am convinced that the stretch between Memphis and Nashville is the longest stretch of road ever. It's like 199 miles of nothing. And there's just nothing out there. You have a few towns, a few stops on the way, and it was 3 or 4 in the morning. And you get, when you're driving like that, where you just forget how you've gotten to where you are. You just kind of forget that. And I woke up in the middle of the 2 lanes between the north and southbound lanes and spun the car around and threw grass all over the car. And fortunately, there was nobody around when I did that. And of course, that woke me up. I was ready for the last part of the trip.
Yeah.
And I remember the next day, my wife asked, "Where did all this grass in the grill of our car come from?" And I said, "Well, it's kind of a long story." But I remember that.
Wow.
What can I tell? There's so many stories. I'll tell you one, it's a more serious story. You think things like this can't happen in the church. I remember when I was a kid, right? And my dad and some other men, really the majority of the men in the congregation, had to challenge an eldership that was doing some things that were wrong. I can remember distinctly the tension in the auditorium that night when they called for the resignation of those men. And I walked out into the foyer with my dad, and one of the men that was an elder literally tried to punch my dad in the foyer. And I can just remember him swinging at my dad pushing me back. And you think things like that don't happen in the church, but I just remember that. It's always stuck with me about how mad this guy was and how incensed he was over being challenged. Who are you to challenge my right to be an elder? And he just wasn't qualified to be an elder. And that's all they were asking for, was for them to resign. And I remember that. That's always stuck with me, that even in the church, you can have scary things like that happen. Super scary.
Either of y'all ever had somebody so enraged that you were there to preach that they caused a big scene and left?
I've had some people stand up and be vocal before.
So we go to this place. I was told my father-in-law and I were going to be preaching. I was going to do the sermon. He was going to do the class. And as far as I knew, that was set up. And so I was like, okay, great. Awesome. And so we go through this process. We're dealing with all of that. And we get in, and my father-in-law gets up to teach class. And this man begins to very loudly ask, why is he the one teaching? And he was the one that was going to be handling the recording too. This is a smaller congregation. But the preacher went over and said, hey, they're in town for this. And I thought it'd be great to let them come and just, preach today. It would be a nice change of pace, have some people we've never heard before. And as they're talking, quiet enough where it's not loud, but it's also loud enough that you can hear, he starts saying something like, well, you're our preacher. You're our preacher. And then it's kind of funny. The cameras that are set up here, he didn't have a nice camera like that because this was way before these were even out. But he took the tripod and slammed it together to get all the legs to close and put it under his arm, and he stormed out.
Yep.
And Mark is in the middle of teaching when all of this has happened. And so I was like, wow, that is really unique that happened. Well, after I got done preaching, the preacher came over and he says, can I take y'all to dinner tonight? And we knew why he was asking. He felt bad about what happened. Well, we get there and he says, I'm so sorry about what my dad did today. Oh. I had no idea it was his dad.
Oh no.
And so he just goes on this little story about, he said, he just really likes it when I preach and felt out of the loop. We don't have elders, it was something that I didn't know was going to present a problem, but I am so sorry that happened. And I said, well, it's okay. So in the mail, when I got back, I was sent, you've seen it in my office, that little dagger I've got. He sent that to me, the preacher did, and one to Mark, I think as a further apology. And I've just never seen that happen ever when I was there. I've heard that it happened, but then everybody knows the types of stories of people who, while they're preaching, somebody comes in off the street and they walk up into the pulpit and they want to say something, and then you've got to try to get people down, and that's a mess. I mean, you think about how odd that is to see because you don't know the mental state of the person in that moment that's doing that. You don't know if they're okay, if they're under the influence of something. You just you're worried.
And as the preacher, you've got the vantage point of seeing everybody in the congregation tense up because they're not really sure what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then you have to kind of calm everybody by taking charge of the situation and getting them to sit down and not be so vocal.
My favorite thing that I've ever seen with that, even though it was kind of a sad situation, was something that just kind of became comical. Someone came in while someone was preaching. They went up to the pulpit. They said, "I got something to say." And the preacher was trying to keep them from saying anything, and just said, "Well, how about we talk here in just a minute? Let me finish this and we can come." And then they grabbed the microphone. And it's one of those thin, mics that go in there. And they pulled it just right to them. And I thought it was going to be yanked out of the pulpit. That microphone is the strongest microphone I've ever seen in my life, because they were really pulling on that microphone and it stayed intact. And I was privileged just a few months ago to preach at the same place. And I got up there and I was inspecting the microphone.
It's still the same one.
It's still the same one. Looks just as good as it did before it was, yanked in that direction. And so I was like, you guys should advertise.
Money well spent right there.
This is money well spent.
One.
You guys know what you're doing.
Most congregations know those have to be kid-proof because after services, all the
They're
kids
all
go
over
over
there,
down. So
Yeah, that's true. Okay, do you know what the word rostrum is?
I've heard it.
Do you think the average child might know what the word rostrum is?
No.
So where I was working, there was an announcement made, please no children on the rostrum.
Yeah.
Every child was then asked, what is a rostrum? And I'd say it's the the stage area. Don't go up there. But you're right. Those kids, they go up, they yank on that microphone. Yeah. They want to play church too, just as much as they saw it. They want to also enact it. But man, it's just things like that are crazy fun.
It's always the people who are the most vocal who provide the most entertainment, I guess you could say. The stories. Every preacher has the one person who always wants to speak up in class who probably shouldn't be speaking up in class. And I had a guy who would always, anytime I would get on Genesis 2, talk about where the Lord made a helper suitable for the man. And King James says a help meet for the man. Well, he couldn't even get that part right. And I thought in every single lesson, in every single class, he would always interject and say, every man needs good side meat. And I would say side meat. And my image now, when I hear anybody preach on Genesis 2, is of a rack of beef just hanging somewhere, because he would always talk about how we need good side meat for a man.
That is amazing. Oh, love that.
You can't stay composed when something like that happens.
That's pretty tough.
I used to have one congregation I preached in, especially teaching class, and the guy would sit literally, there was this congregation had like the little fence, I don't know what to call it, but it was like a fence in front of the, it was just a wood kind of thing, matched the pews and all that, but it was right in front of so that the front pew, was kind of covered, I guess, is what it was for. But anyway, so he sat right there, so we'd pull the lectern down to, teach class or whatever. And so he's like right there. And like without fail, I would, morning, everybody, it's time to start Bible class, and so we're glad everybody's here, maybe have a word of prayer. And then the moment I would literally, maybe read the verse that I was going to get into or whatever it was, his hand would go up. And I'm like, and I would say, brother, I'm not there yet. Give me just a second, to get the idea introduced. You don't even know what I'm going to say yet, and everything. I mean, but it was like, it without fail, he wanted to say something, like he wanted to be the first to say it, I guess, or whatever. But anyway, but so he was always doing that and everything. And so after and this happened like when I first got there, it was like every week, and I'm like, this is insane, So I don't know. One week, I started class and everything, and so the lectern was on rollers, and so I just rolled it up a little bit further. I rolled it up to about the second pew. I couldn't even see him anymore. And so I just kept teaching class and everything. A couple minutes in or whatever, I backed it up and everything. And so I said, all right, now I ask a question, or something like that. So I did that, whatever. But he got the point, and he kind of backed off after a little while. Good. But man, I don't know, it was like for, about 2 months. I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, I can't get anything out before this guy's just, hand is up in the air. Anyway.
Every congregation's got that person.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Every
got to hear themselves or something.
Well, we had my first local work that I was doing. We had a gentleman who I would say, for example, marriage is a beautiful thing. We're thankful that God created this, institution of marriage that we have the privilege to be a part of if we find our spouse and we get married. It's wonderful. And he raised his hand and he always started off with, now you have to understand.
Right.
And then he would just repeat everything I just said, just backwards. So he would just take the last part of the sentence, put it in the beginning and say everything I just said. And then he'd look at me like, you're welcome. Like I fixed it for you.
Yeah, you
and
are
I remember thinking, we said the same thing. There's nothing different. But camp, when you do like a camp devo, you ever done any camps as a counselor and all that kind of stuff?
Yep.
So we have at a camp once where I do a devo every night with the cabin, and I will try to do more of an interactive devo. It's more laid back. It's not just like, here's what we're gonna, what do y'all think about this? Any questions about it?
Absolutely.
Well, there was one kid in there, and he meant well, and bless his heart, he was just trying to be helpful. But it was just so funny how he would word how he wanted to speak. He would go, I guess now's a good time for my comments. I was like, okay. So every night was that way. So the third night, I said, okay, I'll call him John. That wasn't his name. But I said, all right, John, you may now speak. I know you've been waiting. And he goes, I don't have anything to say. What do you mean? I said, you have nothing to add? You've had something every night.
Every night.
Where are your comments? And he got mad at me.
Oh, no.
And I said, I'm not trying to be mean to you, but I think he took it as I was making fun of him. And I really wasn't trying to. I was just saying, but I was also trying to get the point across that it's like, you've clearly had something all week, let's work together and do this. Ended on great terms at the end of the week. Everything was fine. But I just remember feeling bad when he was like, well, I'm sorry, I won't speak anymore. Well, that's not what I want. I just don't want you to be the youngest person in here going, now's the time for me to clean up everything that the counselor just said and fix it. And that's kind of how he was coming across and didn't know it. But those are always fun too. The camp. How many camps have you been to throughout the years as far as counselor or whatever?
3 different camps on a regular basis.
David?
A few.
Yeah. It's about the same. It's usually between 3 or 4. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anything happen there that you'll go on record and talk about?
I'm going to leave that one alone. I'm going to leave the camp stuff alone, I think. Hey,
because you are guilty or because?
Maybe. I might be leading the pranks, those camps.
Okay.
So I'll leave that alone. But anyway, you brought up about driving. So I'm going to go back to that for just a moment. So several years ago when we were in the middle of COVID, and so our evening, we had gone back to morning services. Our evening services, we were just having a class period. We were doing it through Zoom, and so that was like at 5:00 in the afternoon. And so, but we would do it at the building, because we had everything, all the cameras set up there, and so it was easy to handle there. And so anyway, so we're good, Well, our services were a little bit. We had 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. services, so we've got this span of time. And a young brother, a good friend of ours, Cullen, was visiting with us, and so we were there. And he had his little 4-wheel drive, and he wanted to go out, and so Chris had his, and Matthew had his, and I had my Jeep, and so we're going to go hit a trail real quick, in between services, but it's about an hour from my house to get to this place, and everything. But it's, the trail shouldn't take an hour. So we thought, hour there, do the trail for an hour back. We're good. We got plenty of time. Of course, Sunday afternoon. And I never do this on a Sunday, because I know better, but I thought,
seems like you didn't.
We got this, we can do this,
Yeah.
And, but anyway, this is a special moment. So we were trying to get it accomplished anyway. Well, this trail is called Mad Dog Trail.
That should be your first clue.
That should, yeah. It's not as bad as it sounds, but anyway, so we're going at it and everything, and we're trailing through, and we're doing all right and everything, and I go up first because I'm kind of leading the way and get up there, and then Cullen works his way. He gets his up there. It took him a few minutes, to kind of get it. There's this one, pretty treacherous spot through there, rock crawling and getting up. So anyway, we get him through it, and that took a little bit of time. And so I'm getting a little bit worried, and so right at the top of that little trail, there's like this drop off, and so this, sharp 90 degree, you kind of cut back. And when I go around the corner, I parked around the corner, then I'm helping Cullen. Well, when Cullen gets around the corner, I'm looking at 50 Jeeps over in this clearing, and there was a Jeep ride that was scheduled that day, and they're coming there's only room for one way.
Right.
That field is the only place to pass anybody, basically. And so they saw my Jeep and they all parked in the field waiting on us. They got guys coming up and they know that that's the spot that's going to hold everybody up. So they were fine. But you start getting kind of worried and everything. Well, Matthew, he's in his Lexus SUV, and it's lifted and all this stuff anyway. But he was trying to get up this stuff. It was slick. It wasn't hitting it just right and everything. And I was getting worried. I'm like, all right, man, we're just gonna have to back down and we'll get out of these guys' way. Colin and I will go on this way. You guys just back out and go this way and everything. Because I'm looking, this field's getting filled with Jeeps on the other side. They're all out and they're all talking. And I'm like, waving across the way, which is probably, 500-600 yards away, but I'm like, we're hurrying, that kind of thing. And so I'm just nervous as a cat. I'm trying to get it, this is where recreation, we talked about last time, kind of comes in and everything, and stressful. This was not a good day of recreation for Wayne. So I was way too stressed, but anyway, cause I was probably leading, in this Jeep ride. But anyway, this Jeep ride with a bunch of, Toyota, people. Anyway, so this is going, and Matthew's just hung up on the rocks, can't get through it and everything. And it's taken 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and it's just trekking on. I'm like, all right, actually, we've got to call it here in about 5 minutes or we're not going to make it back to services. We've got to be there. Chris and I got to help set up the Zoom so that, this brother can teach class, and we've got to make it back. It's just got to happen, and we're out of sail range, of course, out there. And, anyway, so we finally we decide we're going to just go, and Matthew's going to back down. Well, directly I hear, wah, 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 bam, bam, bam.
Oh,
It was
no.
just, and Matthew made it up, literally almost ripping out everything under the bottom of his vehicle.
Oh no.
But he just gunned it, and he made it up and everything. It didn't technically tear anything up, but man, it scraped everything on the bottom side of that vehicle coming up, and then Chris's was pretty well lifted. So he just kind of crawled up it with no problem and everything. And I'm like, okay, let's go. And so anyway, so the four of us, we trek around, and so by the time we get over there, all these Jeeps are piled up and they're waiting and everything. And I knew the guy that was leading the Jeep ride on the other side. And I said, hey man, sorry to hang you guys up, hold you up. He said, no, we're fine. He said, we should have known it was a bunch of Toyotas, just kind of the ribbing that goes on between Jeep people and Toyota people. And so this was, kind of going on. Everybody's making fun. And so, I'm just kind of like bowing, trying to, I don't want anybody looking at me as we're driving through, but anyway, we're having to do the drive of shame, literally, to get out of there and everything. But it was pretty funny, but that was stressful. But we did make it back. Literally, we walked in with 2 minutes to spare. We set up Zoom, got the class started, and it all worked out. And so Chris and I sat down in the booth in the back, and we just went, it's just okay. We're fine, everything. We made it. It's all good, but it was like for a moment there, thinking, okay, we were in charge of the evening services, and we're going to let everybody down, so all this stress. So sometimes just, there are other things about being a preacher that, just all the stresses of kind of getting things running and everything. But so sometimes just throwing the recreation in the middle of a Sunday afternoon may be good, may not be good.
Well,
Should stay on task probably.
Yeah. I'm sure we've probably been late to services before somewhere, somehow. Has that ever happened to
Yeah.
you? Especially a place you don't know.
mm-hmm.
Last June, I was supposed to go to Williams Chapel in Kentucky, Murray, Kentucky. And I don't like doing this when it's longer than an hour, but I stayed the night because it was the night that Foundations had kicked off our preacher training camp and young men and women leadership camp. And so I stayed at home. I got like 2 hours of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got up. I have almost a 3-hour drive. I left at 6 a.m. to make sure that I was getting where I was supposed to be by, 9:45 for class. And I get to the address that I have put in, and it said the destination is on your right. And what was on my right was the beginning of the movie Field of Dreams, the cornfield, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And I had no one's number where I was supposed to be preaching. I didn't know who to call. So I'm panicking, and I was going to be 15 minutes early. And then by the time I got everything worked out, it said I was going to be about 30 minutes late because I was 45 minutes away from where I needed to be. And so I had to whip around and drive, and I'm trying to get a number for the person and call in, and I whip into the parking lot right as he gets my number and calls me. And I said, I'm so sorry. This was the address I put in. It took me to the wrong place. And so, we just kind of laughed it off, and they're good brethren. We know them. I grew up going there from time to time. I just never drove there before. Well, lo and behold, a couple of weeks ago, Dad was scheduled to be there. And Dad did the same thing pretty much, where he had the wrong location put in. And so
he looked at the cornfield, and it's just Michael Clark was here.
Right. That's right.
That's right. I'm
just
just on the little scarecrow thing, just hanging my head down like in shame. I can't believe I got it wrong. Well, he looked at Mom and said, why do they keep inviting us back? And Mom said, they just really love me. It's probably true. My mom's a lovable person, but if you've been late before, that's nerve-wracking. Have you ever forgotten you were supposed to be there in the first place?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I've had people, you always have the folks say, hey, would you be interested in coming and holding a meeting for us? Sure, just get with me. And I've had plenty of people in the meantime go ahead and set the meeting up, get the date set, and never tell you about it. And then they call a day or four, hey, are you ready for the meeting? What meeting? Yeah, you're supposed to be here tomorrow. I know. You mentioned maybe coming to hold a meeting, and that's happened for a meeting or two and for a vacation Bible school where I've gotten called the Saturday night before VBS starts and said, are you ready to go? I'm sorry, I'm in a meeting on some other side of the world right now. I can't be there. And of course, they get really mad, but it just happens. Yeah. And, in Tennessee, Alabama, in the South, especially when you go through the time changes, it's easy to be late if you don't calculate you're gaining an hour or losing an hour, especially when you're gaining an hour, like you're moving from Central into Eastern time. But it's happened to all of us where we end up beyond where you're supposed to be. And then you walk in, everybody's waiting on you, and all eyes are at you. That guy, that preacher, why did we invite him here?
Yeah. Well, he's got it together, didn't he?
Just say, you guys were early.
I missed the spring forward one time. And, and I had gotten up on the Wednesday and said, don't forget, set your clocks, and everything. And lo and behold, I'm the one, and so I get a call from one of the deacons. He's like, are you coming this morning? And he was kind of in charge of the classes and stuff like that, and I was, of course, supposed to teach class. I'm like, oh, yeah. He said, we're about to start. I said, what did I do? And then it all kicked in and everything. I said, I will be 5 minutes late, but I will be there. Stall, sing a song, do something, and they usually sing a song before. So it was like, it almost, I was about 2 minutes late walking in, after the song. And so he was just kind of up there making a couple of announcements and everything. And I said, well, I got to go ahead and confess. I did it. I'm the one, whatever. And then, Cindy obviously wasn't up either, so she came in a little bit later with the kids, so I was like,
It usually takes one time.
We're a mess.
Get really obsessive about watching the clock.
That has never happened again. That was early in my ministry, and almost 30 years has passed, and I've never done it again. So,
but then you get the other extreme where you get so nervous about missing a service. I've woken up on Saturday mornings and think I've overslept.
I have popped
and
up.
Man, what? I don't have my class material together, and and then it takes a few seconds to realize it's tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I've done that just because I'm so nervous about not being there when I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, we were going to Montgomery last week. So Wednesday, I thought, well, let's go to a congregation there that's in Montgomery that we have some good ties with. The school knows them. They love us. We want to go and see them. So I told Megan, she works as a nurse, and I said, hey, we've got to leave no later than 1:50 to get there by 7. And so we're driving down the road, and I emailed one of the elders, and I said, hey, we're going to be there tonight. We're looking forward to it. He goes, great. We start at 6:30. And our ETA at that time was already 7:05 because we'd hit some traffic. And that was growing because there was a bunch of traffic in Birmingham we didn't know about yet. And I told Megan, I said, well, we'll watch the class online. We'll get there for the Devo. We'll be there in time after class ends. And we might be a little late to class, but that's okay. Well, then naturally, of course, the children say they have to go to the bathroom and they've got to do this. And then we had to go and do that. And then we hit Birmingham and we lost another 10, 15 minutes. We were pulling in to the church building parking lot when they were saying the final amen. And I said, let me just run in, apologize to the elders and the one that I'd said I was going to be here. So I'll run in, and I'm so sorry. I thought that it started at 7 until you told me we were 30 minutes behind schedule. If we had known, I would have left. That's all on me. And I said, I'd really like to spend some time with you guys. Is it possible to go to dinner or lunch? And he said, well, we have a 10:30 class tomorrow. If you'd like to come bring your family. So I said, you know what? Yeah, let's do that, because my children need to see that though we miss services, we're still going to prioritize going to this class. So we get up, we're heading to class, and we get 10 minutes from the building, and Audie, my daughter, throws up in the back seat. And not just like a little spit, it was bad. And we get to where we're going, and I walk over, and there's the little doorway into the class, and the elder and his wife see me, and they're waving me in, and I'm like, no, you need to come to me. I need to talk to you. And bless her heart, this sweet elder's wife came out, helped take care of getting Audie cleaned up with Megan and getting the car seat out, set in the sun some so I could get the materials to clean it. But we missed the Bible class too.
Yep.
And so I told the elders at lunch, I said, somebody really didn't want me worshiping with y'all today. I'm not sure what the reason for that was, but I guarantee you now I have it ingrained in my brain for the next time I'm in the Montgomery area. It's 6:30, not 7.
Yeah.
But that's hard. Like as I travel for the school and go different places, service times are different wherever you go. I went somewhere and the class started at 10:15. It was supposed to end at 10:45. And I didn't know that. And so I'm going along, giving the report on the school and letting people know what we do. And the bell rang. I said, okay, that means I've got 5 minutes. I said, no, you're supposed to be done.
You're done.
I said, let me show you one more slide real quick and then we'll close, because I wasn't done yet. But that's the hardest thing to kind of know is like I go somewhere, I look it up on my phone. When I get into the hotel, I punch in the address. How far is it? What time do I need to leave?
Yep.
And that is nerve-wracking because, like you said, you do it once and you become obsessive.
It just takes one time. You do become obsessive about it. One time, that's it.
Yeah.
You're talking about, your daughter. We were at PTP a couple years ago, and we had our 2 kids, and then we had a niece of ours in the back of the car too. And we were on the way, and she projectile vomits in the back seat. I mean, it's like it splatters us, and we missed all of it that night because of that. I mean, our car is a new used car, but it was a newer car to us, covered in vomit, stank everywhere, and it was off to the change and then go get the car cleaned. But we missed PTP that night because of that.
Yeah, well, it was funny when she threw up. We're on the highway, we can't stop. There's nowhere to stop.
Oh yeah.
And I just said, Audie, are you okay? And she goes, yes. You could tell she really wasn't, but she felt better after throwing up. But that's something that they don't ever really prepare you as a new parent. Like, it's going to happen. And we had done really well. Like Adam really never did that. We didn't have problems with that. But Audie did that, and it was just at the worst possible time. But thankfully, it wasn't as bad as you're describing. We were able to get the car cleaned out, and I bought something that is supposed to like air freshen the entire vehicle from odors and stuff. So that worked out. But it was a rough 24-hour stretch because I just felt they're going to hate me. They're not ever going to want to do anything with me. We got to go have a nice lunch after, and it was great. So, you guys have anything else you want to add?
No. I'm gonna stop there.
Man, thank y'all. Well, thank you, David, for being here. Wayne has to be here. You chose to be here. We appreciate it, and
thank you.
Very thankful for the time that you've taken to us. We're appreciative of the work you do in the kingdom
Same
and
to you.
all that you are involved in. We know that you've got a busy schedule, so thank you. Thank you for being here. As always, next Tuesday we'll have another episode, and that episode will be with Don Blackwell for Through Their Eyes. And then a week from today will be Did That Really Happen with Don Blackwell. So we're looking forward to that. Until then, y'all take care.